morning, good afternoon, good evening. 17th November 2017. Many people in Zimbabwe celebrated that day as the real Independence Day. This was celebrating the military coup that had managed finally forced Mugabe to give up power after 37 years in power. What people have failed to understand is that what they had expected that military coup to deliver, it did not deliver. People thought this would mark the beginning of the real democratic Zimbabwe that they all had been wishing for. But I think many would admit now that it actually dragged the whole nation even deeper into political crisis. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Yesterday, I was discussing on this platform the work of the Arab Blessed Mnangagwa, specifically reference to the speech he gave when he was in Geneva, the UN, where he related the difficult times that he had when he was arrested for covering a press conference given by the late Blessed Geza. This was, of course, meant to be a lesson to punish journalists for speaking the truth. This is the norm in Zimbabwe. This had become the norm during Mugabe's time and has become the norm now. I wanted to contrast what Blessed Geza did with what the MDC spokesperson, Fazai Mahere, did in 2023 at the same platform at the UN in Geneva, speaking on human rights. What Fazai Mahere did was to tick all the boxes, which was, of course, the reason why she was invited to talk. She ticked all the boxes about the problems in Zimbabwe, how we have a tyrannical regime and how oppressive it is. And she also related the difficult times that she had in the regime's jail. The difference was that in her case, she was paying lip service to ending ZANU-PF tyranny. Here is part of her speech, for those of you who may not have heard it.
That if our campaign could just inspire hope and a thirst for change, I change everything. But the person I changed the most was myself. I eventually lost the parliamentary seat, but gained a cause undoubtedly bigger than myself. A pursuit for justice and fairness that goes deeper than the law, but is personified in the everyday lived experience of the ordinary Zimbabwean. I've seen hope in action as I've proudly taken on the role of spokesperson for the country's main opposition party, the Citizens Coalition for Change. And in spite of the violence, arrests, and manipulation of the legal system, we will fight to win Zimbabwe for change in the upcoming election against numerous odds. I stand here today to let the world know that Zimbabwe is currently reeling under a dictatorship much worse than Robert Mugabe. Half the population lives under extreme poverty. 2.2 billion US dollars are lost to corruption annually, and we have the highest hyperinflation rate in the world.
Don't have to listen to the rest of it. The most important bit is she participated in the 2018 elections as an independent. She lost that. The European Union and all respectable election observers in that election condemned the process as flawed. And they came up with a list of recommendations, reforms that should be carried out to make sure elections are free, fair, and credible. Did the MDC or the opposition push for any of those reforms to be implemented? No, they did not. And then yet, 5 years down the line, she and their colleagues, now she was in the Triple C, she was even the spokesperson of the party, they were going to participate in the upcoming 2023 elections, knowing fully well that ZANU-PF was rigging those elections, knowing fully well that participating would give ZANU-PF legitimacy. But they were soldiering on because they also knew that ZANU-PF was giving away a few gravy train seats to entice the opposition to participate. The sheer hypocrisy of her and their colleagues claiming that by participating, they were doing the nation a favor is something that this nation has lived to deeply regret. Because it is that hypocrisy and treasonous betrayal of the people that has left the country in a situation where we have taken one step forward and people like her have taken 2 steps or more backwards. There is no doubt that she and her colleagues were participating in these flawed elections out of greed. That point is beyond dispute. Some of the Scandinavian countries in particular, who had assisted the opposition by giving them funds, after her pathetic performance, withdrew. They did not have to be told that she's just a liar. She's going to participate in these flawed elections out of greed. They could see it for themselves. They were not that stupid. However, some of the other institutions, notably the European Union, were naive enough to believe what she said. The European Union bankrolled both ZANU-PF and the opposition in the 2023 elections to the tune of over 2 million US dollars each. The 2 million US dollars donated to the opposition were looted. This should not come as a surprise at all. To be quite honest, anyone should have seen it coming. Here is a report on what happened with the Triple C over 2 million US dollars.
The account, which is after elections. All along, there was no any other account.
There were accounts, several of them. President Chamisa, I'll tell you, he has got an account. Somewhere. All right? Party has got an account. Coulthard, when we formed the Triple C in January, he drove from Bulawayo to Harare to open an account as the treasurer. And the criminals around President, because they've already captured him, they told him that we've opened the account. And then he said, wow, how? No, we've opened the account. We have used the technical staff to open the account. So there's an account, which is pseudo, where Coulthard is not a signatory, yet he was the treasurer. He drove back. So there are multiple accounts.
So now, as the STU open account, they're not the treasurer.
Yes, I am the Secretary General.
So where is the role of the treasurer? Who's the treasurer?
Well, we appointed the acting treasurer.
Who is the acting treasurer?
No, you will see when these things come, when these things unfold. There is somebody who acted on that basis in order for us to facilitate that opening of the account. But your question was on accountability.
Yes.
Yes, the party fears accountability. Let me tell you, we know one thing for certain, that we received the money from the European Union that was intended to pay the polling agents. So ZANU-PF received the same amount.
Is this a myth or is it
it's not a myth. It's not a myth. We received that money. Our polling agents today are not paid.
How much money are we talking about here?
We're talking about 2.something million. And in next week, early next year, I'll be writing to the president. I need accountability. Those people who were in charge of that money, because that money was dispersed outside my authority. We need accountability. Our polling agents are not paid as we speak. Where did that money go? We went to the campaign. We received monies So people are coming out and say, we put the money on the presidential campaign, we put the money on the members of parliament so that their nomination fees are paid for by the party. And most of the nomination fees, individuals, candidates paid for their money. Where was that money? Where did that money go? So we will be writing to the president soon, seeking for accountability. So we are putting the order. Those who will be outside or those who misappropriated the funds, then law is going to take its course.
You know, I've heard this on social media, this issue of money, the European Union, and all those kinds. I would say, I mean, for the record, I don't have the evidence or the know-how that, but I'm sure what we are talking about, you know, for a fact that the money came in, because we are trying to make sure that it's not speculation, but there was money that was.
There was money. That money is confirmed by ZANU itself. They received the money.
So it was confirmed by ZANU and
yes,
not Triple C.
Both parties that were contesting in the election were given that money. That money was there to do one, training of the polling agents, deployment of the polling agents, taking care of the affairs of the polling agents, food, transport, etc., and stuff like that, so that the election becomes credible. We didn't want a situation whereby the election, there is no polling agent for another political party, therefore it jeopardizes, it compromises the outcome of the election. So that was the essence of that money.
So is it not the money that ZANU-PF rejected?
Well, on paper they rejected, but they accepted the money.
So in your party, who took the money?
This is where we are. This is why I'm saying we need to establish who received that money and where did that money go, because our polling agents, they still need that money. So if these are the criminals around the president, one of them will have to account, and some of them will have to really show the face and tell us where did that money go.
Already there's speculation that you are angling to receive the political finances money.
No, that's obvious. The political finance, it goes to the authority. I'm the authority.
But how are you the authority when there's the president?
No, the president is the face, and I'm the engine of the movement. So
to come back to the issue of the over $2 million the European Union paid Triple C to participate in an election process, which the European Union election observers themselves knew was going to be flawed, because they had a big team on the ground in the 2018 elections, and they confirmed that those election process was flawed. They came up with the recommendations. They knew that none of those recommendations had been implemented. They sent a team just before the 2023 elections to check whether the recommendations had been implemented. They found out that none of the recommendations had been implemented. So they knew without any reforms implemented, ZANU-PF was rigging those elections. They also knew that the opposition was participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that by participating, they give ZANU-PF legitimacy. And they are participating out of greed. The question then is, why was the European Union so generous, paying for a process which they knew was flawed, which they knew was undermining all efforts to bring about meaningful democratic change in Zimbabwe? And yet they were prepared to bankroll it. And now the same European Union is learning that the money they so generously donated was not used for the purpose for which it was intended. We have learned from other sources, other Triple C leaders who were involved in the 2023 elections. Shelton Wente was one of the senior members in Nelson Chamisa's Triple C. He participated in that flawed election and was one of the few who did win a gravy train seat, and he took it. In one of his posting, he revealed that yes, some of the monies that was meant for the election agencies disappeared. Chamisa himself has admitted that as many as 500 election agencies were not deployed. And now we know also that a lot more of those who were deployed were never actually paid. And Shelton Wende here is revealing that some of that money was used to buy cars and to buy farms. This is the tragedy of Africa. First of all, we were betrayed by ZANU-PF. The hopes and aspirations of the liberation war were all forgotten as soon as ZANU-PF got anywhere near getting into power. One man, one vote was one of the key pillars of the people's struggle to end ZANU-PF dictatorship. Sorry, the white oppression regime independence. And yet, when the chance for the people to exercise that right, 1980, ZANU-PF undermined it. At the Lancaster House talks, it had been agreed that ZAPU and ZANU-PF, who had freedom fighters in the field, they would withdraw their freedom fighters to designated assembly points during the campaign period. ZANU-PF signed and agreed to that at Lancaster House. But by the time they got back to Zimbabwe, they changed their mind. Many of the freedom fighters in ZANU-PF were left in the field, and they were given the instruction. Their campaign message to the people was that if ZANU-PF does not win the coming elections, the Bush War would continue. So out came, forget the one man, one vote. Of course, people voted to end the Bush War. ZANU-PF won the 1980 elections. And as soon as they got their feet under the desk, they started working for consolidating their power by seeking to destroy the only other political party that constituted a serious political challenge to the regime, PF ZAPU. They launched the Kukurahundi massacre in 1983. The rest is history. By the late 1990s, the people of Zimbabwe were hoping that they could dismantle the ZANU-PF dictatorship by electing an opposition party that will implement the democratic reforms and end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends stepped forward, promising the nation that they would deliver the democratic changes the nation was dying for. They even named their own party the Movement for Democratic Change. But as we know, they too sold out. They've been now on the political stage for 26 years and counting, including the 7 years in the GNU of 2008 to 2018, when they had the best opportunity to implement those reforms. They failed to implement even one reform. And not only that, since the GNU debacle, they've been participating in these flawed elections to give ZANU-PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship, all out of greed. So we're back to where I started. Fazai Mahere was talking of participating in 2023, knowing fully well that they were participating only to give ZANU-PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship, all out of greed. My main disappointment really is with institutions like the European Union, who continue to bankroll both ZANU-PF and the opposition to perpetuate a process, an election process, which they know is flawed and will never deliver any meaningful change. The other problem we have is the people themselves. We have become so naive and gullible. We have failed to even question why is it that 26 years after MDC, CCC appeared on the scene, they failed to implement even one token reform, including during the GNU when they had the golden opportunity to do so. When Chamisa lied to the people that he was going to, that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes to encourage them to participate in the flawed elections, it is unforgivable that millions believed in those idiotic lies. And yet they did. And what is worse, millions out there still do not want to believe that Chamisa lied to them, that Chamisa is a liar and a conman, even with all the mountain of evidence of who he is.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election, $15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Akasangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
Even now, there are many Zimbabweans out there who still refuse to accept that Chamisa is a liar and a conman. This is not helping the nation, because it only means Chamisa can lie to them again and con them to participate in flawed elections, perpetuating the dictatorship and the nation's suffering. Right now, the nation is involved in what to do about this Constitution Amendment number 3. Let me state here, and I've said it before, that this amendment is a decoy. The real fight for the people of Zimbabwe, if we want real political and economic change, has to be the fight to make sure that we cure ourselves of the case of rigged elections and bad governance. And for that we need to implement the democratic reforms. If we can't get the reforms implemented, we should make sure that we do not participate in flawed elections to give ZANU-PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. That is the argument. And yet, the people have been conned into believing that this amendment is the most important thing. We must fight to stop the amendment. Here is Tendai Biti, one of the MDC CCC leaders, who sold out, talking on the issue of the amendment.
That is to say, 2/3 in the National Assembly and 2/3 in the Senate. It must then go to a referendum, because it is a bill altering term limits in the country. The referendum is a simple process, Baba. The referendum simply asks whether you are saying yes or no. Because we are going to campaign and live in the mountains to get that no vote.
Don't have to go back into any greater detail than that. What Tendai Biti is arguing there is that he and his friends are going to live in the mountains, in the valleys, to stop this amendment going through. That the referendum, ZANU-PF will lose that referendum. But we must also accept that law is not an exact science. And per se, no one can say for certain who will win in a lawsuit. Much more so when you're dealing with a country where all the state institutions, including the judiciary, are corrupt. They will do what the government tells them to do. So winning this referendum is not even guaranteed. Indeed, the regime has drafted the amendment bill in such a way that the referendum is not even required. But that is not what I really wanted to emphasize here. What I wanted to emphasize was the fact that the likes of Tendai Biti are now saying they're prepared to live in the mountains and valleys, fighting for the amendment. And yet, he was one of the senior MDC leaders during the GNU. He was the Minister of Finance. And he was involved in the negotiations to produce the global political agreement which gave birth to the GNU. Of all people, he knew what was required to implement the democratic changes. And yet, in the 5 years of the GNU, they failed to even submit one reform proposal. Not even one. This is where we are. And yet now, he wants to give us the impression that they are now prepared to fight, to live in the mountain, to end, to stop the amendment going through. An amendment which, like I said, even if it doesn't go through, it will not change the fundamentals on the ground, which is that we have a dictatorship. It will not change the reality on the ground that as long as ZANU-PF is able to rig elections, we will have a ZANU-PF government, a ZANU-PF dictatorship. The amendment is only meant to settle who is going to be the dictator. If the amendment goes through, then Mnangagwa will be the dictator. If it doesn't, it will be some other ZANU-PF dictator. But it's ZANU-PF dictator nonetheless. We should be smart enough by now. I started this discussion by mentioning the 2017 military coup and how the people made the mistake of thinking that it was going to end their problems. It did not. People are repeating the same mistake. They are now being drawn into believing that stopping this amendment will change Zimbabwe's political future. It is not. Here is the real reason why Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends never implemented even one token reform. And now why they don't want to even talk about implementing reforms to end this case of rigged elections. They are corrupt. Mugabe bribed them, and the rest is history.
Bhazi rikafira musango, munhu asina kwaari kuenda mubhazi mumu anofara kuti ndo patopumba pake nditori nevamwe vangu pana. Munhu anorwadziwa nekurara musango munhu ane kumba.
Taibadana kumba kwangu.
But amana kumba kugombeza rangu rere. Mana so. But munhu asina imba hatete kurara musango. So opposition inomake sure kuti vanhu vaya vawane minda. But may he so yeah, rest in peace Tsvangirai. Praise ravo vanga vainaro. Chamisa anaro.
Anaro Chamisa. Ane family.
Kana azoramba. Ndoenda newe.
Riri kupi?
Ane farm.
Ribi.
I know madresse munhu anetsa kuti focha, but anaro. Chakudza off camera.
Okay.
Ane mine. Ane mine. Ane makaseo.
Yeah?
Yes. Biti. Ane praza. Hauna kumboona here picture yabiti achitenga mombe kuna Temba Mliswa. Dzekuisa kupraza. One of the biggest beef producers in the Matabeleland region, the Washman Ngwe.
Okay.
Yes, ane praza. Anautenga beneficiary land reform. But what they did is to discourage their people from acquiring my farms. Because why is that munhu akaona something chapiwa nehurumende haachapikisa.
Are you for real, Mr. Kanishai?
Nomubvunza Washman Ngwe kuti haasi kuita beef here, producer beef here paprasi. Tonyaendanetsa naupo waching'ono gore rere. Handiti kuti stand yaupo waching'ono standard ine painogumira. But vakatotaura nehurumende nemasabhuku ikaextendwa because aita god.
So this issue of the amendment is just a decoy. Just as the 2017 military coup was a decoy. It was meant to make people believe that if we achieve this one, we'll finally get the democratic Zimbabwe we want. The reality is the only way you're going to get a democratic Zimbabwe is by implementing the democratic reforms and cure ourselves of the case of rigged elections and bad governance. That is the reality. And the failure to accept that reality only means we are perpetuating our own suffering. So I go back to the original statement I made at the beginning. Many Zimbabweans celebrated 2017 military coup. They were cocksure it was the transformative moment. What went wrong? Well, what went wrong is that we are being naive. Most significantly, is history repeating itself with amendment number 3? The answer to that one is yes, history is repeating itself because we are once again focusing on amendment number 3, which is not going to cure the problem of ZANU-PF rigging elections. Because as long as ZANU-PF is able to rig elections, it can impose the dictatorship. And it is the dictatorship that is more important. As for who is the dictator, it's It's important, yes, but it's only academic. Just as much as in 2017, we replaced Mugabe with Mnangagwa. The country did not change. We only replaced one dictator with another. We're still under a dictatorship. And hence the reason why we are still in this mess. If we learn from history, that is our problem. We really need to learn from the past if we are going to stop repeating the same mistake over and over again. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.